So recently, a bunch of unaired pilots found their way online, dating back to the 90s. What I want to do is look at these pilots and determine two things. 1. Did it have potential? And 2. How different would popular culture be if this pilot was picked up for series? Today we're opening up the pilot vault and looking at the pilot for a show called Manchild, the beginning of a proposed American series starring Kevin Smith. Now, we cover a lot of different pilots on this show. We talk about sitcoms, dramas, animated series, talk shows, but this is the first American adaptation that we'll be covering, as this was a remake of a British series by the same name. The pilot made big changes to the characters and premise as it moved the setting from London to LA. I have wanted to see this pilot for years, and it only recently made its way online. So I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, and I've always wanted to see this because it's a bit different from the usual stuff he does. It's not a show he created, it's a show he had simply been cast in. This was during the era where Kevin Smith stopped making his own stuff as much and decided to be open to working on other people's projects instead. A few years after this, he directed the awful Cop Out, the first movie he had directed that he also hadn't written. The Manchild script caught Kevin's eye because A, the script was very slim, and B, the cover letter said nothing about rewriting, which is the reason why he usually was given scripts. He was directed to read it with an eye towards the role of Paul. Kevin claimed that he laughed out loud reading the script several times, and Kevin is such a good storyteller that it made me really want to see this pilot, but it couldn't because it was never made into a full series, and the pilot never aired. Well, today we'll be looking at it. Kevin at the time said, "We shoot the pilot in December. If Showtime digs the pilot, we go to series 2 months or so after that. With 12 episodes a season, it would mean he would be out of the directing game for only about 4 months of the year. So he was expecting to work on this for a long time. It's mad to hear that the time between filming the pilot and the rest of the series is so short. It makes me think of all the other pilots we've looked at, where they were only a few weeks from filming more of this stuff. Right then, shall we take a look at Manchild and figure out if it was really as funny as Kevin claimed it to be? We start with some narration from a character named Tom. He starts by establishing the theme. They say you're only as old as you feel, but really, you're only as old as you act. After doing some surfing, Kevin starts smoking in the middle of the water. They then have some banter that is certainly Kevin's type of humour. Let me put it that way. It's not the funniest stuff, which makes me really worry about this pilot, but I can definitely see how Kevin loved it. If it wasn't for them sat on surfboards in the ocean, and they were instead sat on the side of the road or something, then I could have easily been convinced that he wrote this. It's exactly his type of humour. See this wetsuit that Kevin was in? He told a story about it on his podcast a few years ago, and he called it the most humiliating piece of clothing a fat person could ever put on. And he talked about how he'd rather be dressed in a Speedo in public than being that thing again. He said that they was in wetsuits because the writers wanted them to begin each episode with them on the water, getting ready to surf and having this conversation that kicks off each episode. Apparently Kevin went to them and said, "How about we mix it up and 1 week we're playing mini golf so we wouldn't have to wear this wetsuit." We have some gratuitous nudity. One of the guys has to kick a woman out of the pool as his girlfriend has just got home. This isn't being a man-child, is it? It's just being a cheating prick. The woman, Nina, sneaks away from the house by pretending to be a Spanish maid and getting Joe to give her a bunch of money. Because, you know, women, right? They love taking your money. What am I meant to say about this? It's cliche and one-dimensional, not particularly interesting. We then learn a bit more about Gary. Not really anything interesting to say about that. Bit boring, really. Then we learn a little more about Kevin Smith's character. He swears an awful lot. They seem to think in this pilot that swearing equals funny, and 95% of his scenes are just swearing. Kevin is stalking his ex-wife and her new husband, hiding out in the car across the street. By this point, I was yet to laugh at this pilot. The pilot I was promised was hilarious, and this wasn't it. Gary is sleeping with an old woman who he believed was 50 but is actually actually 62. He tells her that his ceiling is 50, meaning that was the oldest age of a woman he'd sleep with. This is obviously stupid and ridiculous, so she kicks off, and for good reason. But for some reason, the actor gives it the most half-hearted kick-off ever.
Get out!
Whoa, calm down there, Susan. You're gonna break something? Tom and Laura go to therapy. They're the married couple of the show, and it's here where we had the biggest laugh of the show. Well, the first laugh of the show for me. They're talking about intimacy, and Tom talks about kissing, but then Laura says something really unexpected, and it really took me by surprise. It was solid. Unfortunately, I can't play a clip of it because I'll immediately get slapped with that yellow monetization symbol. But the pilot is out there if you want to watch it. Kevin plays his character really well. He's a lawyer, but he proper hams up his man-childness. Kevin is so naturally charming that it's nice to see it shine through his characters. He doesn't act a lot. Yeah, I remember he was in Die Hard 4, but other than that, I can't think of any major roles he's done apart from Silent Bob, where obviously he's not speaking. Well, he speaks sometimes, but very rarely. While Kevin is on a date, Gary sneaks back to the old lady's house with some plastic flowers and apologizes to her. Are we meant to believe that those flowers are real? Honestly, Kevin is the strongest thing about this pilot. It certainly gets funnier once you look past all the too farness. See, I'm a writer, and I'm currently working on a project with a friend of mine, and he'll occasionally pitch jokes that are way too far, and I'll shoot them down. If I was on the writing team for this pilot, then there would be so many moments where I'd go, let's not do that. Sometimes you can just go too far, and just because it's horrendous, it doesn't mean it's funny. We then get some it's funny because he's farting humour. I don't think a fart joke has ever been funny. I genuinely couldn't name one. Maybe the scene in Blazing Saddles? Yeah, I'd say that was a funny scene where they're around the campfire. If anyone could do it, Mel Brooks could do it. There's some humour involving Kevin crapping his pants, and it's, well, it's out there. It's not necessarily funny, but it is where it is. Joe finds out that his girlfriend is pregnant and she's keeping the baby, so immediately this changes his life. It would mean no more messing around or anything. Probably, we don't know. This was just setting up future stuff that we'll never get into because it's only a pilot. Kevin's date leaves him because he crapped his pants. There's a funny bit later on where Kevin is explaining to his friends why the date failed, and he lies about it and says, she wasn't my equal intellectually. It's a pretty funny bit. Like I said, Kevin is definitely the best part about this pilot. And then we have a scene at Joe's club where all the characters show up for the final scene. There is so much gratuitous nudity in this show, like a ridiculous amount. There's no need for it. The episode ends with them sharing an 80-year-old single malt, which they describe as being the only thing in the bar that is older than Gary's girlfriend, which is a solid joke. I enjoyed it, well done. It's mad that we've gotten to a point in this show where when there's a joke that actually has the structure of a joke, we praise it, because so many of these pilots that claim to be comedies can't tell a single joke. Honestly, this pilot was a bit of a mixed bag. See, when I started watching this, I was pretty disappointed because the humour was a bit much. Too much swearing, too much nudity. It just wasn't for me. But then occasionally, there were actually some decent lines in there. I completely understand why Kevin found this so funny. It felt like his work. I could see a bit of Clerks humour shining through there. Honestly, I think I enjoyed this more than I disliked it. So where does this rank among the other unaired pilots that we've looked at? Well, it certainly redeemed itself, and I'd say I got more laughs out of this than I did with Imperfect Junior. So I'm going to stick it between that and Rex Is Not Your Lawyer. Was it the best thing ever? No. Would I have liked to see more of it? Yeah. So that's why it's so high up. Do you want me to talk about other unaired pilots? If so, leave a comment letting me know which ones you want me to look at. And subscribe. Help us get to 4K. Right, I'll let you go. Bye.